Sometimes you would get to class and the teacher wasn't there and we just have a great discussion. And that's what we're doing right now. We've arrived in class.
Okay.
The teacher is not here.
Okay.
And we're just having a discussion. So
okay.
Say what you say, bro. Say what you just said.
So when we talk about how people say we want the same education, all right, can it really be the same education if you're coming from different realities? And I'll explain. So let's say we get 5 students across the board, 1 Black, 1 white, 1 Arab, 1 Asian, 1 Latino. We all put them in Harvard's business school. Everybody goes through the same curriculum to receive that sophisticated food stamp we call a Harvard MBA. Of the 5, let's say that the Black one is the only one that's looking for a job, while the others are out to create jobs by developing their own industries and institutions. So we all got the same education. So why are the outcomes different? You see,
that's a great question.
And I think this is what Carter G. Woodson was alluding to in Miseducation of the Negro, when he said that, and these are his words, when he said that it took him 30 years to undo the damage that Harvard did to him in regards to miseducation. And then further, and because I come out of the business arena, he said, when the Negro goes into business school, he is taught business from what he calls a Wall Street perspective.
Right.
All right. As opposed to immigrants who come to this country, when they engage in business at a street level, whether it's running a bodega, whether it's running a fruit stand, what have you. And they learn business from ground zero and move upward, which is why within, let's say, 2 generations, you find certain immigrants dominating certain industries because they didn't sit inside.
You sounding like Thomas Sowell now, bro.
Well, no.
Hey, the professor just walked in. Hey, okay. Professor.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to talk after class, brother.
Okay. Well, this will probably be during class, so.
Okay, that's cool. Ladies and gentlemen, our professor has just arrived. So I just want everyone to get themselves ready for Professor Kimya's class.
Black diamond, black diamond. Black diamond, black diamond. Black diamond, black diamond. Black diamond, black diamond.
Grandpa Crump. Yee. All right, Code Keepers, class has begun. Hopefully you have your notebooks ready. I have mine. Hopefully you have your water ready. I have mine. I know you have yours, Zumbi, right? Check?
Yes. Okay.
Check. Professor, what's on the curriculum for tonight? I know we're talking about, hey, stop crying about banned books and protesting.
All right, so I don't tell Black folks to stop crying. We understand the outrage because we're Black folks, first and foremost, okay? So I focus on solutions, and our people regarding race have done solutions-based work for 5 centuries. I want our people to understand that, contrary to what people are told when they're told to follow this DEI standard that's based on oppression over and over again and talking about the oppressors. It goes back to what I said about Harold Cruz's focusing on the inner world. And that's an example of integrating different approaches, which includes Dr. Thomas Sowell. So I, as Dr. Kimya Dennis, I specialize in integrating all these approaches, which includes economist Dr. Thomas Sowell. I want Black folks to read the extent of what Dr. Thomas Sowell was explaining, the role of class. Read all of Thomas Sowell's writings. I have his books on my shared Google Drive. You can't just find one thing that offends you and close the door on your own people. Black folks, unfortunately, do that too much. Thomas Sowell was a former Black radical who became a conservative. By the way, being a conservative does not mean being part of any political party. And he never became a Republican. And so Dr. Thomas Sowell highlighted the role of fiscal conservatism in particular. He also had many interviews where he talked about the impact of economics and tax funds on health. What does it mean when we're paying for health, like universal health care, but it's not really good health services? And this happens around the world where people celebrate affordable care, but they're not looking at the fact that being affordable does not mean it's now good. So what does it mean to demand more than it being affordable and paid through our taxes? But now we're actually demanding financial audits, and we're demanding good medical and health professionals providing good medical and health services. Because unfortunately, as Black folks, we have been taught something that's counter to what our people have done for centuries. We've been taught to just accept what's thrown at us and be happy we have it, instead of saying, okay, it's thrown at us. Now we're actually we're gonna dissect it. We're going to do some qualitative and quantitative research as a people. And we actually need to do that more. So I encourage Black folks, read more of Dr. Thomas Sowell's work. It's okay to dislike something Dr. Thomas Sowell said. It's okay to disagree with something. But as Black folks, we can't discard each other because we don't like what each other says. Instead, understand the larger meaning of what people are conveying, because Dr. Thomas Sowell, Dr. William Julius Wilson, who's a fellow Black sociologist, are very similar. They both highlighted the roles of social class. Both are alive. Dr. Thomas Sowell is 93. Dr. William Julius Wilson's 88. And the difference is that Thomas Sowell took a global perspective. William Julius Wilson still took a USA perspective, and William Julius Wilson never reduced the role of race. He always highlighted race. Like when he wrote the book Declining Significance of Race, he was not saying that it was really declining. That was probably a title he chose to get attention. He was just saying socioeconomic status, which is occupation, income. He said it as class. It's increasing in significance. A lot of people, including my colleagues in sociology, do not read stuff. They just critique it and complain, but they haven't read it to its extent. Sometimes people open a book because they already disagree. So I tell people, this is where it's okay to read something on your own. I always tell people, do not join book clubs, including in organizations where you already know that you're told you better believe something and you better not believe something else. Liberation, freedom.
Whoa. Say that again.
Yeah, I'm one of those people. I want our people to read more. So this includes when I talk about what it means when we're changing curriculum. Changing curriculum has to be done in our families, collectives, communities, because we were actually the first people to have community corners where we put books on the corners, because we were not allowed in bookstores, libraries, and the schools that had the resources. So we were the first to have those books in the corners, not everyone else that people see now. So you have to do that learning in the household, in our communities, in our collectives. Then we bring knowledge into schools. And knowledge is not conspiracy theories, cons, different versions of history that we've created to validate ourselves, but it actually has to be factual, period. I always tell people, factual, period. Okay? Just like I'm pro-Africa, it doesn't mean that Africans created everything around the world, okay? We can still comprehend the origins of humans and what humans around the world have done, because Africans are also trailblazers of thousands of years of human rights. Like even as trailblazers of racial justice rights for 5 centuries as Black folks, racial justice rights are connected with human rights, okay? So it means that we have to understand the balance there. So therefore, I want our people to read more. You can't be outraged about curriculum and banned books, but then in black families, y'all not reading. Hello? I've literally had black parents where I said, well, let me get you some books. They told me they don't like to read themselves. So I'm like, well, why are you really mad about what your children can read in school if you're not showing your children the art of reading?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, 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 okay. One of the times that you've been on the show, you said that blacks should ignore most things and focus on important things.
But you
I
was
see that.
misspelling my first name.
Yeah. That one had a mistake in that. But this concept of we need to stop. We need to ignore a lot of things and focus on the important things. The more that I listen to you, the more I see that coming out.
Yes.
The more
I
I
mean,
see that coming
we're
out.
conscious, which means we notice things. I tell people I don't watch news stations. So when something's hot in the news and hot on social media, what you want me to do? Change my focus? You want that to I want black folks to understand there's common denominators, okay? Something can be something that gets attention, it becomes considered a quote unquote hot topic.
Mm-hmm.
But people consider black folks, and when I say people, I'm talking about people around the world. They consider black folks like puppies in an open field. Anything they throw in our way, they we're gonna be like, ooh that. And if they say something that's outrageous to us to make us angry, they really think that we're gonna get mad at something new every given moment. We're gonna be
Squirrel.
outraged at something a politician has said, so therefore we're no longer gonna focus on each other and ourselves. We're gonna be busy fussing at non-blacks, fussing at everyone, and they have to understand regarding race. I want you to stop laughing first of all, brother,
All right,
brother Barter.
it blows my mind, and I laugh when things just are crazy to me that those things happen.
Well, I mean, I just want black folks to understand that this is the intentional design. It's an intentional design. So the intent is to get us to show attention. Just like when the images of the black man hitting somebody with a white chair on a boat, whatever, that was the attention grabber. Like it's always something. So then you have to ask black folks, how much are you going to do that routine? It's taking your time, it's taking your energy, it's taking
Crazy.
your resources, it's taking your references. So now you're outraged over books. What types of books do you really want in the schools? It better be more than talking about transatlantic slavery and Jim Crow, by the way. Because if that's what we're reduced to still, then you don't understand the core of us doing mathematics. I mean, that's the foundation. We talk about the art and the mathematics of our hair, even as Africans before we were forced on the Western Hemisphere. I mean, there's so much that goes into this. So this is why I want black folks. I want us to be part of reading groups that are actually based on reading, based on factual discussions that can have disagreements and debates. Don't
And
join organizations where they're telling you, read this, but you better only read this. And you better only take this from that as well. Because
that's the
that's
part.
problematic, even when it's done with religious groups, schools, nations. They're giving you a very narrow focus, which does not give you a chance to learn anything. And I just tell our people, what are you trying to accomplish? Because you can't complain about schools putting people into that tight knit if you as a grown folk are doing that for yourself and then you're teaching that. Like I want us to remember that's taught every generation. So therefore, can you be shocked when that is done by schools? It's done by schools. We talk about trade skills. People are mad that schools are not teaching certain skills in trade. Why? I mean, yes, schools that are public schools and certain non-public schools as well are paid through our taxes. So we do want outcomes paid through our taxes. But why do we expect everything to be done by outsiders? That's definitely not what we should expect.
That's That's interesting. Brother Zumbi asked the question, I guess, before we got started. I want to let him elaborate on it. And it was something like, what must education mean to us now and in the future? Minister Zumbi, man, why don't you elaborate on your question?
Before we jump into dialogues, and this is one of the things Dr. Amos Wilson always says, define terms. And not only define terms, but how does the terminology fit the condition of the people? So when we talk about education, we must ask the question, what does education, or what must education mean for African people in the 21st century and beyond? One of the things that is discussed is, what are some of the functions of an education? So one of the functions that I look at is, an education should be able to ensure the collective biological survival of a people. If we were to look at the education that we received from, well, let's just start at 1954, since that's kind of a watermark time. So let's say from 1954 to now, and I'm asking this rhetorically, has the education we received in America, how has that collectively been beneficial to African people in America? So if we are to look at creating a society of our own, even if it's just our neighborhood or our village, do we have an education that will help us to manage, maintain, and I guess in some cases expand the village in question? Because I think a lot of times we go into these institutions and the only thing we're focused on is getting ourselves into a Fortune 500 company, as opposed to creating, managing, and maintaining a space of our own that we can call our own. Okay, so if once we sit down and begin to define what must education mean for African people, because, and I'll probably bring this up later in the conversation, I found an article in Forbes magazine where it asked the question, can universal basic income help to alleviate the turbulence that's created by artificial intelligence and automation? And then in my mind, I go one step further. How does this article impact African people, not just short term, but long term? So we always have to look at things through our own lens and not through someone else's pair of glasses.
Bro, is there a question here?
But that's the question I asked. What must? Are you drinking?
No, I'm bro, I'm
and I'm gonna have to be like, Doc, stop laughing.
Okay? You know I laugh, bro. You know I laugh.
But
anybody
in a critical,
checked out the show, you know that's what I do. So,
but in a critical moment,
but what's the question? What's the question, bro?
The question is, what must education mean to African people in the 21st century? That's the $1 million question.
I said, okay, Doc, and
go ahead. Oh, I thought I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh no. But that, like I said, that's the question, because we sit up here and we say education, but we don't clearly define it through our own, through our own lens and through our own paradigm. So that's why I said that has to be really the foundation. What must it mean for us?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I see, well, education is formal and informal. So of course, informal will start, like I mentioned earlier, families, communities, collectives. So the same thing when we're talking about social learning, there's verbal, nonverbal cues. So people just have to think about, what are they teaching? Because of course that includes morality and laws but as people, we have to understand we're only going to learn a fragment of what there is to truly learn throughout our lives. So this is where we just have to have a realistic expectation in terms of learning trades, skills. I I'm not a fan of AI. I also don't like checkout lines at grocery stores, all that stuff. So technology for me, I like basic stuff. So when I was interviewed, I think it was last summer for an African mental health group. I just talked about I want our people to not rely on social media and so forth because I really think that we need to, in terms of education, defining education. For me, education means knowing how to use something if necessary, but not relying on it. If it disappears, how will we operate before it existed? For those of us who existed before AI and other tools existed. So that's the same thing when we're talking about schools, what people want schools to look like, what people want the curriculum to look like. I always tell people you have to bring the knowledge into the schools, and that could be forms of technology that you're teaching in communities. Because when we talk about what's paid through our taxes, it includes organizations in nearly every city and every state that actually provides different trainings and resources. We have Black organizations and Black individuals who are doing resources to train Black adults, workforce development, mental health training, substance use training, all types of resources, so that when people go into school, you're not waiting for schools to recognize everything. You're not waiting for schools to be the deliverers of every trade, every skill set. So therefore, if parents and families say, well, this is not taught in the schools we want it to be taught, you can still demand that. But I tell Black folks, as it's also explained in the YouTube description for this session, we're not the only people who have jobs and work hard. I encourage our people, be it PTA meetings, be it school board meetings, and not just when something happens that makes you outraged and you want to show up fussing, okay? Because if you're only around when something happens to which you disagree, they definitely will ignore you. If you think you're already ignored, they definitely will ignore you if you will not consistently be there. So when I was in high school, I was the president of the technology group, which is interesting. So we made little robots. It was, predominantly Black Richmond Public Schools, and our robots were horrible. But it was wonderful because we did have a few Black teachers who tried. But the wonderful thing is I come from a family of my parents are both social scientists. So they've had us reading, watching Tony Brown's Journal. We watched BET News back when it was real BET News in the 80s and 90s. And we actually came into school challenging the teachers. We talked about what are we bringing here? The role of PTA, the role of school board. It has to be Black folks being visible consistently, active consistently. And again, I have to just remind our people, we're not the only people with jobs. We're not the only people with families. We're not the only people with health issues. We have to do what we've traditionally done, which is form connections with each other, right? We can't talk about village without forming those connections with each other to say, if you can't attend this PTA, then who's going to attend the PTA? It has to be something, because if other people see that we're so divided that we can't come to PTA, we can't consistently be in school board meetings, they truly don't care our opinion about school accreditation. They don't care about our opinion about program evaluations for schools. They don't care about our opinion about books, curriculum. They don't care about our opinion for anything if they know we're not going to be there regardless. So this is where how we define education, we can go on about that, but I just want Black folks to say, in addition to looking at how we define it, including trades and skill sets, how are you going to be involved? Because as Black folks, we love to talk, right? That's another procrastination method. How are we going to define it? How are we going to do this? We're going to do this. But now, are you going to be involved? Because that's the multitasking I was talking about. We can still talk about defining it and all that stuff, but let's walk to this meeting while we're defining it together. Okay, there has to be some actions involved in that.
Professor, I really enjoy how you stated in your quote that Black families have jobs. The piece I love, we cannot be invisible. So, you talked about PTA meetings. You talked about being, active and present at the school board meetings. What are some of the other things that we can do to really make sure that we do for self with the education system that we currently are dealing with publicly?
Yeah, so being involved in school fundraisers, and by the way, Black folks, don't start fussing at me. Yes, many of us are involved in schools doing fundraisers and everything, but we're talking about the aggregate here, okay? If there's only a small percentage of Black folks consistently involved in every generation, that's how accreditors, school teachers, superintendents, politicians, and we're also talking about the Black folks who work in these roles, paid through our taxes, they see us as not present and not involved. This includes teachers' unions, including Black teachers' unions, where their focus is not on the curriculum, their focus is on their salary. I want you to always remember that. I don't want Black folks to talk about we need to pay them more if they are not the ones who are doing more than hashtagging about banned books. I tell people, your hashtag about banned books means nothing if the book that you're teaching in your class is really about transatlantic slavery. What are you really showing our people about our progress? You want us to just be defined as slaves? And then you want us to just shout for your slaves, so your salary to be increased? It has to be something more than that. You know, we're talking about 5 centuries in regarding race. And race is not synonymous with racial oppression either. So as Black folks, we cannot be synonymous with racial oppression. There has to be something more to that, but we can't expect schools to want something more than that for us. That's what families and collectives and communities have to do. We have to say, here's what we're going to push. Intellectualism is the foundation of Africans. Therefore, intellectualism is the foundation of Black folks. But guess what? If we don't recognize that as an aggregate, and again, Harold Cruz is among the many Black intellectuals who write about this. E. Franklin Frazier critiqued Black intellectuals as well. If we don't recognize the intellectualism of our people, including how we use art to send messages, art meaning dancing, singing, you can't just say, man, why be always dancing and singing? Well, if you don't like us dancing and singing, then learn how dancing and singing can also be used to learn poems. It can be used to learn the elements in science classes. I learned the elements because my mom taught me how to sing about it. I thought it was the most boring thing in the world. And now I'm 47 and I do He La BBC No Ethne, Numago CP's Clarka. And that's how you learn the elements. There's different methods that we have to use. We had rappers in our middle school and high school teaching us these horrible European poems. In retrospect, it's horrible for us to learn a European poem. You could have learned some Langston Hughes, you know, even W.B. Du Bois was a poet. We could have learned some James Baldwin. But they were trying to find ways for Black youth to understand that knowledge can be expressed through music as well. And of course, I was trained as a harpist and a pianist, and I'm a singer as well. So when I do presentations, even as a professor in classes, I use music. I sing, I put some old school hip hop in there. I do a lot because that's how I think. I always have a lyric. I always have something. So we have to find a way to make it known that we're just creative and crafty in what we do. But we can't expect schools to always do that. We have to teach that to each other. And then that shows young people how to express that themselves. And then they just build that throughout their lives. We just have to stop expecting other people, including Black folks who are in these roles, and all they care about is their salary. We need to stop expecting them always to make those fixes. And so this is why I teach our people how to make these changes.
I guess well, for me, I always take the maroon approach. And the maroon approach is, along with, you know, being involved in the present school system, what can we do in converting our homes into miniature institutions? I get really fed up every time I sit in Barnes and Noble, and the only time I see Black folks in Barnes and Noble is that they're walking through Barnes and Noble to get the Foot Locker or the Finish Line. Okay. When do we turn our homes into institutions? If we were to walk into 100 Black homes, how many of them would have a dictionary and or thesaurus? How many of them would have a globe? How many of them could say that they have 100 books in their personal library? So when we talk about being self-reliant, being self-sufficient, it's about taking an initiative. What is it that we want to be? What is it that we want to learn? And when we choose that, so let's say if we choose a particular topic that we want to be experts in, we always must ask the question, how does my mastery of this topic help African people, domestically and globally? Okay, so if we can't make our own homes miniature institutions, then why should we expect external institutions to do for us when we can't even do for ourselves, where we don't even order a $20 book, or we won't even order a children's book and read it to our babies when it's time to go to bed? How many of us do that? Okay, so some of the simplest things that we can do. The first thing that I was given when I was a child was a comic book. That's how I was able to start my reading journey, by reading Marvel. Okay, and the first thing that I was given to read, thank God, was The Falcon, because that put into my subconscious the fact that brothers can actually be superheroes. Okay, so what are we willing to do for ourselves, regardless of what happens externally? That's the position I always take.
Bro, that's an interesting point. I remember I got involved in comics, and when my parents noticed that I was really starting to read comics, my mother and father showed up with copies of the X-Men and said, read this. Who is this woman? I'm like, Oro. Psst. She became my prototype, man. But the interesting thing about comics, man, is that the language there. I learned a great vocabulary, particularly with Marvel comics. You know, make mine Marvel, DC, boo. But I'm going to get some pushback on that. Hey, man, when my parents started feeding me comics and then asking me about the storylines and asking me about the personalization and the development of characters and why people were going through certain things, man, that's a powerful strategy. I think that's a really powerful strategy. I'm glad you brought that up.
And going back to what the doctor says, Black folks have a nasty habit of being hypocrites in front of their children. Okay, don't sit up here and talk about what the school isn't doing, but yet you're not willing to be that example. Okay, so how can you tell children to read this, that, and the third, but yet you won't even pick up a local newspaper to understand what's happening in your own hometown? So we have to stop being hypocrites in front of our children and be able to lead by example. So children will not always remember what you say, but they damn sure will remember what you do.
Yeah,
well said.
definitely.
Professor, any thought?
Yeah, so my brothers and I used to go to the comic book shop every Saturday, the one on Forest Hill Avenue, Richmond, VA. And that's how I was first introduced to X-Men, and I became Storm at that moment, by the way. So it was 1980.
I can see that. I can see that. Okay.
So I want my locks to go silver eventually. And so this is an example, because there also are Black comic book groups. So of course they're Black comic books, and then there are Black comic book groups that are forming Black comic book conferences. So we want Black folks to understand that reading, being readers, does not mean you have to read about transatlantic slavery. You don't have to read about institutional racism. You don't have to read about anything that you consider intense and boring. There's romantic genres, there's all types of different genres with Black authors. And you don't have to only read Black authors either, by the way. I mean, you could read anything that you want to read. You're only going to read a segment, but I want our people just to understand there's millions of books, and our people have written so many books. Some of them you can find for free, a PDF online. So I'm among the Black folks around the world who we create shared Google Drives, and we put PDF of books online, and we share it with our people who want book access. And so, like the Thomas Sowell, for example, I give it to people. I just want our people to understand we do have access to books. I don't want people to think that bookstores, libraries, and schools still control us like that. They don't control us to the extent that people want to claim, especially now that we have so much technology access, including people who got tax funded Chromebooks, and they have access to computers at libraries with their library card. We have to remember, if you go log on your Instagram, you can also log on to your Gmail and access this daggone book that I sent you on a shared Google Drive file. So we just want people to understand it's okay to not feel like reading. We're not saying you have to read 24/7, 365. We're just saying we don't want our people to pretend you don't have access to books. It's okay to say, I just want to read maybe once a week on a Saturday. That's something, because you really want our people and you want children to understand that reading is fundamental. It's something that shapes your learning. You can read some comic books, yes, but you also want to read some other writings that'll shape your intellectual growth. It could be economic development. It could be something like career development, and not just new books. Like, this is one thing I want Black folks to understand. I said it actually last Wednesday also. So we have a lot of new books written by our people. So buy those new books, buy them. They're published in 2023, 2024. Yes, buy them. However, you want to remember, we're not reinventing the wheel every time there's a new book out. You also want to read centuries of Black writings that came before that. Those are the trailblazers. So read some of the writings that came before that. Some of them I have in my home library. Read all that, and then you know the foundation. Because the new books won't have all the space to tell you, hey, this is what so-and-so said 200 years ago. Instead, read so-and-so's book, okay? Now, mind you, some of these older books, now if you want to purchase it, they cost like $200 because it's more difficult to find some of these books. But I just want our people to understand, you can appreciate the new books, but you also want to have a foundation. It's just like if you take a class in a K through 12 or college, and they're teaching you classical theory, contemporary theory. They're usually not going to teach you Black folks' theories, unfortunately. But we do have theories. We've had them before the 1980s, by the way. We've had more than a century of theories, and not always pertaining to race. But you will not know that unless you read our writings over the centuries. So this is where when I do presentations and workshops in our communities, I just tell our people, we love each other very much. But loving each other comes with challenging ourselves and challenging each other. It's uncomfortable because it requires looking in the mirror, like seriously, and saying, we all have things that we just have to remind ourselves. We're complaining about something that we can up. Yep. And so the Magdalena Walker, her 160th birthday was July 15th. So of course, I'm from Richmond, VA. She's born and raised in Richmond, VA. Trailblazer, first African-American woman to run a bank. She did finances and investments. And as she got older, she was paralyzed. So she also did work regarding people with disability. And she is a tremendous trailblazer. So if you come to Richmond, of course, where I'm born and raised, you will see her statue in West Broad Street, and you'll also see the Maggie L. Walker Governor's School. So I just want our people to understand, yes, there are always problems. However, if you're someone who always talks about our problems and our oppressions without ever concluding with solutions and how you're contributing to solutions in schools and elsewhere, then that's the real problem. Okay, and this is why I explain everywhere.
That's the real problem. I love how you put that. Brother Minister Zumbi. We're kind of close towards the end of class. Any questions you might have for our professor before we end? And after you ask your question, brother, why don't you tell us about your book?
There's really no question per se. Tonight I'm probably more in student mode than anything. So I'm really just sitting and absorbing what's being taught, because usually the teachers are always eternal students. And I think that's something that we must always be in, is be in student mode. The minute you say that you got it all or you know it all is when you get into trouble. So I'm probably more in student mode tonight. In regards to my actual book, the book is entitled The Gospel of Afronomics Theology. It is a 22-year collection of personal experience and research in areas of business, economics, entrepreneurship, finance, through an African-centered paradigm. I took on the challenge of saying, how do we look at these subjects through our own pair of glasses? And then coming up with not just a philosophy, but a program, a plan, and a process that can help us confront those challenges and overcome those challenges throughout the African rural community.
All right, Doc, I know you're going to pass out some of your information. In other words, you're going to give the Google Drive links so the rest of the students can tap in. If you can put that into the chat, I'll make sure that it gets out to the rest of the class. And while that's happening, classmates,
Am I giving out Google Drive links?
Yeah, put it in the chat, or whatever the link you want to give out. I know you normally give gifts. Not tonight?
No, because I actually want to see what our people think I'm conveying here, because I did not finish what I'm trying to convey here.
Oh. Well, then we'll do our last commercial break, and then we'll end with you.
Say that they are living paycheck to paycheck.
You will be wealthier.
My wife and I were flipping our first house.
When you shift the way you see things, then your life is going to shift.
Money is a tool for what you want. Money is not what you want. You don't want money.
So that goes to show that you don't have faith when you do not take your money and put it into those accounts to earn interest. When you're scared thinking that something is going to happen, God says, who are you trusting in? Because I'm the one that has created the money system.
Well, I then got offered $350 million for my company.
It says you owe about $538,000.
That the individual and the individual family unit is responsible for filling their own cups.
I went from being homeless and living on the street to owning properties in Baltimore.
And that's why I decided to start a bank.
This is something that Martin Luther King spoke about.
Stupid mistakes and failures. We continued stumbling forward
because the black community, for the most part, had to go and rent.
All right, so back to our wonderful professor, Dr. Kimya Nuru-Dennis.
Okay, all right. So normally I would send some readings, but as you see when I sent the link for the Dr. Noel Ignative, How the Irish Became White, people had comments without even reading the book. So this is why I want our people to pause before commenting, actually do the readings instead of going based on assumptions. So here's what I want our people to do as the next steps. And then they can contact me if they want some readings in my shared Google Drive. Step 1, discuss with your family, with your community, with the collective that you're forming, what curriculum do you want for the school that you are developing in-house? And I'm not talking about homeschooling, because homeschooling is not more effective than any other school, by the way, because homeschools don't automatically teach facts either. What curriculum do you want to develop? And, I've created curriculums and I've done program evaluations for 9 years. So what do you want it to look like? What kinds of information do you want taught? What do you think should be the required courses? What do you think should be the optional courses, meaning courses that are not required to graduate? If it was something that you could do in-house. All right. Then create a list of materials that you are going to include in your courses. And this is the courses that you're going to teach at home or the courses that you're going to teach in the community or the collectives. And when I say courses, again, Black folks, I'm not saying that this whole thing is going to be about transatlantic slavery, oppression, systematic imperialism, fascism. I don't want y'all to be brainwashed to equate our people to that. And then there's no future prospects beyond that, okay? We're talking about
crazy
economic knowledge, mathematics knowledge, music, literature, arts, sciences, social sciences. We're talking about the full span of our people's knowledge, including Black scientists and Black creators of musics as well. If you have a difficult time finding knowledge to write down that you want that does not focus on oppression, this is why I tell our people to pause, okay? Because if we can't think about anything beyond oppression, are you shocked that schools want to just add oppression stuff to us when they do curriculum for us? So when you're selecting readings, when you're selecting books, what I do when creating courses, hiring teachers, selecting textbooks, peer-reviewed journal articles, and other articles, is I look at the demographics. Who are the writers? It can't just be Black folks on the front like, hey, you have to say who's in the reference page. Are these mostly non-Blacks? And let me explain that really quickly. So there are still people who claim that Dr. W.B. Du Bois's Talented Tenth was about genocide and eugenics. No, it was not, okay? I encourage you to read Du Bois's The Philadelphia Negro from an historical context, him as a Pan-African socio-historian who's also a sociologist. I'm a Du Boisian sociologist and criminologist. Understand he also wrote The Talented Tenth write-up in 1903 to explain further the skill set needed and the occupation, the socioeconomic status. It's similar when you look at Marcus Garvey and the segment of the Black population that Garvey thought could be furthered in the United States of America to address race first. So if you look at Marcus Garvey's focus, you would think that he had a component of Talented Tenth as well. So therefore, I want Black folks to understand, you can't say Du Bois' Talented Tenth was genocide, eugenics, if the version of that is non-Black interpretation. Like the feminism stuff, which is not, by the way, Black women's justice. It's not based on Black women, okay? You want to understand what Black people were doing, what Black people meant. So this is why when you're doing your curriculum, you have to say who's represented in this curriculum. That's why I want Black folks to understand how to do the qualitative and quantitative research. Even if you're not trained in methodology and statistics, you know how to just look through the reference pages. Every school that has claimed that they're changing their curriculum, they tend to go, I'm not going to call places out, but what they tend to do when they say they're doing racial justice in curriculum is they tend to go to predominantly white schools, and what they integrate is a very predominantly white curriculum focus. Most of the authors are not us. They're not indigenous natives. They're not Asian. They're mostly white people. Okay? So this is where you have to just investigate more. Who's represented in these publications? It's okay for not everyone to be Black, but you just have to spend more time doing what you expect schools to do. Choose materials, look at who's represented in teaching the materials, check the interpretations of the materials to make sure it's proper interpretations, and then figure out how are we going to teach this and how are we going to encourage young people and old people to bring knowledge into school environments, not conspiracy theories, not any scam components, not any false beliefs, but actual facts. I still have to convey that because I've had students in college who think that, you know, when we're talking about Cesar Lombroso, we're talking about false notions that Africans are apes and all that stuff. Well, they'll say things like, well, white people are this. And I'm like, all of that is false. Okay, there's falsehoods on both sides. Okay, so just make sure you're not conveying falsehoods because you think falsehoods are pro-Black and pro-Africa. It's all false. All right. So this is why I just want our people to be inconvenienced, because creating a curriculum is inconvenienced. Just like reading is not always going to be fun because it's going to take some time sometimes, right? So creating a curriculum is going to be an inconvenience. Taking some notes, writing some things down, starting to be the teacher, like KRS-One was talking about in his philosophy, right? What does it mean to teach? But as teachers, like the brother said, teachers learn every day. Most teachers, unfortunately, don't read that much themselves. That's why I want our people to understand. If you want to be a teacher, now you have to challenge yourself to read more. Because now you have to challenge yourself to know, are you teaching something false yourself because it's based on your beliefs and not based on facts? So these are just steps that I tell our people to do. And we can talk about this more next week or whatever our people want. But this is just what I want our people to do. It's important for us to challenge what's paid through our taxes, challenge schools, challenge police, challenge government officials, challenge medical resources to become better. But we can't pause as Black folks waiting for everybody else to change. That's the inner world that we have to improve so that we improve ourselves, and then everything else can be changed and trickle down. But we don't wait for everything else to change before we improve our people.
Wow. Okay. Professor, I think you just shared some light on what Black education should be directed towards, what the outcomes should be, and how we should view it. That's some food thought for me. I'm going to ponder this for a while. I think you've kind of changed the way I was looking at what Black education could be. Well, what say you, Zumbi? Gotta unmute, bro.
Okay. I always look at it within the context of what type of society do we want to create, and creating a curriculum that will help us develop that society, manage that society, and maintain that society. I guess I always like to look at things through a 3-step process. The first step is having a clear and thorough knowledge of self, of who we are as people. The second part is developing the skill sets necessary to build, manage, and maintain. And then that third step is what I think the Marines call it a crucible or a capstone, to where now you take everything you've learned in those first 2 phases and now you go and apply it. And I think that's where, for me, that next step is the application of everything that we have gathered thus far. Because I don't want us to be known for just ear sex and hoe chatter. When future generations of African people look back at us, I want them to look at us the way we look at the pyramids and other institutions and entities in Kemet and in Kush and in other parts of the world where we've made our presence known.
Bro,
and I just want to throw out there, by the way, for Black families and Black collectives, if you're teaching about Egyptian pyramids and Ankh and Hotep, you also want to provide a factual history. So we're talking about thousands of years of Arab Muslim colonizers who terrorized the Nubians and pushed them further south of northern Africa. So there's a reason why when you look at historical depictions, you will see lighter melanin people who are more European, more Arab Muslims, and that's what introduced colorism thousands of years before Europeans created racial categories and became the colonizers of Africans on African land. So this is why I want Black folks, if you're starting to teach about pyramids and everything, you also want to understand why the people will look like they have thinner textured hair, lighter skin, thinner noses. Those are not the original Northern Africans who are Nubians. We talk about brand Nubians, right? You want to also watch documentaries. There are free documentaries on YouTube that talks about the Nubians, how they're still being terrorized in Northern Africa. These are the browner melanin people. A lot of times people used to say, well, if you're in Northern Africa, of course you're going to have lighter melanin. No, actually, there were some brown melanin Africans in Northern Africa, and you will see documentaries now of them still being forced southern parts of Northern Africa. And this issue has spread across Africa, which is also how Islam spread across Africa and, of course, around the world as well. So this is another example of teaching factual history. We can celebrate Ankh and Hotep, but you want to make sure you're celebrating it in terms of an African component, but distinguish the true African component from the Arab Muslim colonizer African component, because there's a huge difference there.
I'm glad you brought that up. So Code Keepers and my fellow students, on the Our Black Empowerment channel here on YouTube, we have a lot of great content that supports the things that Doc was just talking about. Hey, we have some great information from Dr. Barashango. If you're not familiar with Barashango, you can check him out there. We have a couple of things from Dr. Ben. And I'm telling you, Dr. Ben used to drop it. I also want to bring into your information. I do a presentation on the African origins of fraternities, sororities, and masonry. So this is a talk I did at Norfolk State University in 1997, and I found the video, so it's up here. And the ancestor Renoko Rushidi, he used to come to the Hampton Roads area very often, and he and I would break bread. And so we have some of his videos. So if you want to learn more about what she was speaking about in regards to the Nubians, who were the fathers and mothers, the parents to the Cometians, then you can definitely do a deep dive on the Our Black Empowerment Get on Code channel, and we have the content there for you. So, wow. Hey, Professor, another great class. I'm clapping. If you've been watching, make sure you follow up on Doc's determination. She said, hey, just decide what you want the curriculum to be about. Start writing the curriculum. Do all those things that Doc talked about, because I think it's going to make us a better people, and we'll be better prepared for the opportunities that are forthcoming. And the opportunities are forthcoming. So we got to be ready for them. Any last words? All right. I guess we can bring this class to a close.